This program is funded in part by a grant from Humanities Nebraska.
This feels good. How y'all doing? Oh, I love that energy on a Saturday. Welcome to the first ever Nebraska Storytelling Festival. First off, can we please take a look around and give a massive round of applause to our hosts? Playhouse has been nothing but wonderful to work with, and we're absolutely happy to be here. We also want to say a big thank you to Humanities Nebraska for believing in us and believing in this project, because they gave us the funding to make this thing happen. Right? Come on. I was so surprised when I heard this was the first ever. I was like ever? Like, really? And yes, there have been storytelling events, but the statewide storytelling festival, a first? Come on. So, loving that. Also, a big thank you to Bailey Lauerman. They made the logos, they helped us with our marketing, and that helped get the word out for this sold-out crowd. You might have gotten a program. If you don't have one, goodness gracious, get yourself one. You see how they're beautifully printed. If you open them up, it's nicely lined out. We have our very own Marcia White to thank for that. Please give Marcia a round of applause. Tonight you're going to be hearing a bunch of amazing stories, and I mean storytelling is in the fabric of Nebraska itself. We want to say thank you to Nebraska Public Media for supporting us. They let us on Friday Live. They are also going to be taking audio recordings from our show and using it in some of their shows too, so can we please give them a round of applause? I'm sure you've heard it before, but storytelling has been since the beginning of time itself. But here in Nebraska, storytelling is way more than just tradition. It is literally integral into our lifestyle and how we feel here in the heartland. And it is in that spirit that we honor Roger Welsh, who is one of the greatest storytellers to ever touch American soil. We carry his energy with us as we go into this event. Again, thank you all so much for coming out to the Nebraska Storytelling Festival. You ready to get this thing started? I'd like to introduce your first storyteller, Jackie Ostrowicki. Jackie is the Assistant Vice President for University Affairs at the University of Nebraska System, where she leads marketing, branding, and digital media. A native of Chicago, Jackie holds a BA in advertising and an MA in educational administration from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Performing the Barbie House, please welcome Jackie Ostrowicki.
My mother is an immigrant. My mother is a perfectionist. She immigrated to the United States from the Philippines in the swinging 70s. And whatever my mom had to do, she did it with all her might. She had the longest hair, the shortest skirts, and the tallest boots. Now, we grew up with a lot of people in my house speaking Tagalog, cooking, and laughing. But when it was time for us to eat, we always waited, because my mom had to scoop everything out of the pot and put it into a serving dish, and then she had to cut up carrots into little star shapes and put it on top for a garnish, because she liked everything to look pretty. Now, when anything was awry or out of place, it drove my mom nuts. She would iron her pillowcases, and she would also iron my dad's underwear. And me, I never left the house without being ironed to within an inch of my life. Now, when I was growing up, I had this particular hairstyle, bangs all the way across. Now, these bangs had to be cut frequently, and they were cut in the kitchen with a very big pair of scissors. And my mom had a cape around the house because my mom was just the kind of person who had a hairdresser's cape laying around the house. Now, other than my bangs, my hair was generally in 2 high pigtails. And let me tell you, pigtails have a lot of capacity to create pain. First of all, you guys know this, right? You take the comb, you center it in the middle of the nose, and then you draw a line to the nape of the neck. My mom's parts were never crooked. And then ponytails. Here's the thing, you don't comb them down, you comb hair up. How unnatural is that? Into 2 ponytails, which then my mom would affix with some rubber bands that she fastened so tightly, there was no chance of any hair escaping. So when I was 5 years old, my uncle got married, and he picked me to be the flower girl. I had a peach silk dress that went down to my ankles, and it swirled when I walked. I was going to get to wear makeup. The day of the wedding, I was ecstatic until it was time for my mom to do my hair. Here I am, 5 years old, sitting on the toilet lid with my peach dress and my blusher, my lipstick, and here's my mom holding a giant hot curling iron. So she grabbed a piece of my hair and she wrapped it around the curling iron barrel from top to bottom, and I'm sitting here terrified. I can hear the hairspray hissing. I can feel the heat emanating an inch from my face, and I thought, there is no way I am going to die. At the very least, I'm going to get burned. I waited, and it was over. But that was just the first curl. So here it goes again, wrap it around, hiss, heat, and pretty soon I'm like, oh my God, oh, this is gonna take forever. I'm gonna get burned. And so I was looking at the rug, I was looking at the shower curtain, I was looking at the laundry chute, anywhere but at the curling iron. And my mom just lost it. She said, stop it, stop moving around, you gotta sit still, we are never gonna get your hair done before the wedding. And then she yanked my hair and she smacked me on the head. And she said, be quiet and sit still. So I did. I was very quiet and I was very still until she got done and she told me I could leave. So when everyone else was getting ready, I decided to wander around the house, and I ended up in the toy room, which was dark. So I opened the door and thought, I'm gonna turn the lights on so I can see my toys. But I heard a noise, and it was coming from the corner, and it was coming from behind my Barbie house. And I realized it was my mom, and she was crying. And even though I was only 5, I knew that she felt so bad for what happened in the bathroom, but I also knew that she needed some privacy. And so I tiptoed out of the room, and I shut the door, and she didn't even know I was there. So the wedding came and went, and I'd like to say that's the last time that ever happened. But nope, we had an ongoing war about hair. So there was lots of yelling and lots of crying and lots of arguing, and my mom never apologized. But every time that happened, I would think about the moment behind the Barbie house, and I would forgive her. And it wasn't until many years later, when I had my own daughter, and we had lots of fights about hair, that I realized mothers and daughters have a really complicated relationship with hair. And it's not just about the hair. It's about what hair symbolizes, it's about what it means, and it's about love. Now, my mom knew what the world expected of women, what it expected about how we looked and how we acted and how we talked and how we dressed. And she wanted me, her daughter, to have the best chance possible out there in that world. And like I said, my mom was an immigrant. She had dark hair, she had brown skin, she spoke with an accent, and she stood out automatically. And what she was doing when she wanted me to be perfect was she was setting me up to protect me from how cruel the world could be. And when the world was a little out of control for her, she could control her appearance. She could control her children's appearance. And honestly, that kind of helped set everything a little bit right. And what I realized was that my mom's perfection actually came from a place of love. Now, I have an 11-year-old just sitting out there somewhere, and one day we were getting ready for a dance recital. Those things are wicked, people, dance recitals. And I'm trying to twist her hair into a bun, and it's untwisting itself, and I'm trying to poke a pin in the left side, and then a wispy's poking out on the right side, and then I go for the right side, and a wispy's poking out on the left side, and I was failing at the ballerina bun, and time was ticking away. And so my daughter kept squirming, and she was looking in the mirror to see how I was doing, and she kept turning her head, and finally, I just lost it. I mean, if your temper was a dial, mine was broken, and it was on going up. So I yelled at her, and I yelled at myself, and I was like, I can't do this. And it really shocked me. It really took me aback. And I'll tell you why it took me aback. Because I was becoming my mom. What the heck? I was repeating this cycle. And I was being a perfectionist because my mom was a perfectionist. But here's the question. Did I have to be? You see, my mom's love was perfection. But maybe, just maybe, my love could be letting go of perfection. And I knew I had found my own kind of love one day when we were getting ready for a play, and my daughter picked up the brush and looked at me and said, Mom, should I comb my hair? And I looked at her and I said, honey, you look perfect, just the way you are. Thank you.
I feel like, you're listening to that story and you're seeing that moment, like the Barbie dollhouse moment with you and your parents and whatever situation it was, like at the same time, incredibly relatable. Can we give one more round of applause to our storyteller? Our next storyteller is Madison Hager. Madison has been telling stories since she was 3 years old. Those who know her attest to her love of spinning a yarn, whether it's recounting an interaction at the grocery store or a life-changing event. She's a copywriter by day and creative writer by night. Please welcome, performing Bad Magic, Madison Hager.
I didn't learn that I had magical abilities in a fun way. And what I mean by that is, it's not like an owl delivered a letter to my house letting me know that I got into a prestigious school for witches and wizards. And it's not like my cat finally talked back to me one day. Instead, learning that I had magical powers had more to do with my boobs than the occult. Let me explain. I was a fat kid growing up, and conveniently for my bullies, my first name, Maddie, happens to rhyme beautifully with fatty. So as you can imagine, they got very creative. And of course, this was the 90s, so it's not like you sent your kid to therapy for being bullied. You were supposed to pick yourself up and dust off and get on with things. But I didn't. And I never really got over being bullied, but instead, my personality grew around being bullied. And I became this kid and this adult who was and is very preoccupied with what people think of me and my body. Then I got to middle school, and I noticed that suddenly the attention was on all the girls' bodies, not just mine. And the girls that came back from summer break with boobs, wow, they were really popular. The boys loved them. And so I thought to myself, okay, that's it. All I've got to do is grow a pair of big boobs. So I waited, and I waited for my big boobs. But they never came because, in hindsight, that's not how genetics or puberty works. And instead, the boobs that I had were always, in my opinion, too small and too pointy. And they didn't really make me feel like the sexy, bodacious woman I wanted to be. Then I got older, and I had my first sexual partner. Mom and Dad, I'm so sorry. Please cover your ears. And he told me that my breasts were weird. And it humiliated me. And it made me feel like I had this terrible secret hiding under my shirt. And I began to hate my body, but also hate myself. And that's also not something that ever really went away, even with a lot of therapy. And even as recently as 3 or 4 years ago, I can remember just having one of those terrible body days where I was looking in the mirror and I just thought to myself, I hate my breasts. I wish I could just cut them off. And yeah, of course, plastic surgery always was looming in the back of my mind, but realistically, I couldn't actually afford it. But ever industrious, I did some research, and I learned that breast cancer patients have 100% of their reconstructive surgeries covered by insurance. So it's not like in that moment I was actively like, okay, that's it, eureka, I'm gonna get breast cancer. But I would be lying if I said that when I had those bad body days, the thought didn't cross my mind. And more than once, I remember saying out loud, I hate my breasts so much that, yeah, I wish I would get breast cancer because then at least I would get a free boob job. Well, you know what they say? Be careful of what you wish for. In May of 2020, I finally went to the doctor for a lump I found in my right breast, and I had been ignoring it for several months because I was 29 years old. I don't have a family history of breast cancer. It was probably nothing. And this was the height of the pandemic. I mean, peak, we thought you could get COVID from the mail. Peak, wiping down your groceries with Clorox wipes, right? It just didn't seem worth it to go to the doctor for something that was probably nothing. But that little voice inside my head kept nagging and nagging, so I finally went. And I went in on a Monday. And by that Friday, I knew I had breast cancer. And it ended up being stage 2. So because of my age and the staging and what we discovered was a genetic mutation that likely caused it, my treatment was very aggressive. So at this point, I've basically done all the cancer things a person can do. I mean, I've had more surgeries than I can count, and I've harvested my eggs, which sounds fun, but it's not. And I did that because I ended up having to do chemo. And chemo can impact your fertility and your chances at being a mom, which is a thing I've always wanted. And the thing about chemo is, yeah, it is genuinely as awful as pop culture has led all of us to believe. I mean, really, I lost all of my hair, my beautiful long blonde hair, the one thing about my body that I ever really loved. And I would get sores in my mouth and weird rashes all over my body. And some days I was so nauseous that I couldn't eat. And then some days I was so exhausted that I couldn't get out of bed. And the thing that doctors tell you about chemo is that it's cumulative. And so what they mean by that is that as it goes on, it gets harder and harder for your body to bounce back after an infusion. But what they also mean is that it wears on your spirit. And it absolutely wore my spirit down. On those really bad days during chemo, I felt like I was in this hole that I had dug myself, and I was looking up at the life I had built before, the life I was trying to lead, and I was trying to claw my way back up there. And I couldn't, no matter how hard I tried. And on those really awful chemo days, it was so difficult not to feel like I was full of this bad magic, that I had manifested my cancer by saying how much I hated my boobs and saying that I wanted a free boob job. And the thing about cancer that I never realized when I said I wanted a free boob job was that you can't wave a magic wand or cast a spell and get your life back. It's not as simple as that. You lose the life that you had before, and you lose the person you were. And there is so much grief in that realization. And it still makes me sad because I worked really hard to become the person I was before I got sick, and it's been very hard to say goodbye to her. But time is healing a lot of my wounds, and every day I feel better and better. And this is very serendipitous, but exactly 2 years ago today, at this time, I was lying in a hospital bed in Omaha, having just had my free boob job, my mastectomy. And after that, I was declared cancer-free. And what I've realized since then is not that I'm full of bad magic. Bad luck, yes. Bad genetics, absolutely. But the magic in me is powerful. And it's what helped me crawl out of that hole during chemo. And it's what helps me push on and hope for the life I want, even if I know statistically sometimes the odds are against me now. And it's also what has brought me in front of you tonight to share this story. And I find those parts of myself absolutely enchanting. Thank you.
I'd say a good part of that magic is her storytelling skills as well. Am I right? One more time for Madison. Our next storyteller is Barb Schmidt. Barb enjoys life's adventures with her husband and 3 adult children. She spends her days working at the University of Nebraska Foundation and evenings and weekends making music, gardening, attending arts events, walking, reading, and spending time with loved ones. Performing Unlocking a Pearl, please welcome Barb Schmidt.
If she were a human, Pearl would be a young adult. But in car years, she's lived a lifetime. Pearl came to our family when we had 3 children in about 3 years. We needed a vehicle where 3 car seats would fit right in a row in the back, and Pearl was the answer. Over 200,000 miles later, those same 3 children have graduated from car seats to the driver's seat. And they share Pearl to get them to their college classes and to work and on social outings with their friends. Pearl shows her age by now, as you might guess. Like me, when she gets up in the morning, she's a little creaky and slow to get going. Her ceiling is stapled up so that it doesn't again fall on the driver and blind them. Her radio hasn't worked for years, except occasionally when you go over a bump. One day I was driving down A Street and I thought I heard a gunshot. I pulled over a few blocks later to figure out what had happened and discovered that her trunk spring had broken off into the trunk. We looked into getting it fixed, but they don't make the part anymore. And they told us we could go to a salvage yard to try to find one, but we decided we didn't really need to be able to prop the trunk open. Also, her remote locks haven't worked for a long time. But that's not a big deal because just like in the olden days, we can put the key in the keyhole and turn it to get into the car, right? So Pearl has taught us a lot about not needing the bells and whistles, right? As long as she gets us from point A to point B, that's all we really need. So we weren't all that surprised when our oldest daughter, Milan, called on the Friday of Memorial Day weekend to report that she was going from one job to the other job, and she couldn't get the key to turn in the keyhole to get into the car. Well, she thought maybe after all those years on the road, that keyhole just needed to be cleaned out a little bit. So she used the end of a pen to kind of clean that out, and it broke off into the keyhole. And so it was not turning at all. Her sister Catherine came to her rescue with a different vehicle, and she got to work. And meanwhile, I thought, well, maybe it's like when you restart your computer and walk away. When you come back, it'll be fine, right? I was hopeful. But she came back and she couldn't even get the key in the hole. I called our son Peter, who had an extra key. I thought maybe it's a key problem. So I picked him up in my car and we went over and tried that key. It didn't work either. And so we thought about it a little bit. The car was parked in a meter spot and it was Memorial Day weekend. We couldn't leave it there all weekend. And we knew it would take a while to get it in for a repair. So we just needed to get it to a safe place. We didn't want to call a tow truck because it drove fine. We just couldn't get in. So we started thinking about it. The key did work to open the trunk. So we pulled that open and started looking around. And there's that magic hole that exists between the trunk and the back seat. You know, the one you can push down and then you have a cup holder in the back seat, or you have a pair of skis and you need a hole to fit those through. Push that down. Madeline's pretty slim, so I held the trunk open because, you know, it won't stay up by itself because the spring is broken. Madeline crawled in and put her arm through and her shoulder, and that was as far as she could get. So she reached. I held the trunk. Peter stood by the window coaching her because she couldn't really see what she was doing. Just a little bit further, to the right, to the left. Okay, come on, you're almost there. She couldn't reach. And she thought, well, my legs are longer than my arms. If I take off my shoes and socks, I could reach with my toes and grab the lock. So she did that, but her legs weren't quite long enough either. Well, she was wearing nice work pants. Peter was wearing athletic shorts, and his legs are longer than hers. So he said, maybe I should try. I've got a little more flexibility with wearing shorts. My legs are longer. So in he went. Madeline held the trunk open. I coached from the window, but he couldn't reach either. Well, I couldn't not try. So off went my shoes, and into the trunk I went, trusting my life with Peter, holding it open. And between laughter and involuntary bodily sounds, I reached with my toes too, but they didn't reach either. As I emerged from the trunk, I noticed that there were people on the bike trail nearby, looking curiously, probably wondering if they were witnessing an abduction, or possibly a car break-in, which they kind of were. And so I made sure to smile and wave crazily. Nothing to see here, everything's fine. And then we decided that we needed to move on to the MacGyver portion of our project. What tools do we have here that could make this work? We looked around, and of course the first thing we saw was that broken trunk spring that still sits in the bed of the trunk. It's just a long metal pole with a curve on the end. So Madeline climbed back in and tried to reach with that, and it actually reached the lock, but there was no way to grab it to pull it up, so that didn't work. Being the good mom that I am, I did have a ponytail holder in my pocket, so we wrapped that around the end, thinking that maybe that would be enough to be able to grab the lock and pull it up. But we couldn't figure out how to get it on there and to hold, so that didn't work. Looking around, I spotted the bright orange tourniquet I had received in a first aid class recently. It had really strong Velcro, and it could wrap tightly around a limb or whatever you might need. So we tried that, but we couldn't figure out how to reach it all the way over there and affix it to the lock, so that wasn't gonna work either. And then I could almost see a light bulb forming above Madeline's head as she exclaimed, "My shoelace!" She dove to the ground. She pulled the shoelace out of her sneaker. She had fixed the end of it into the kind of knot that if you pull on the long end, it's going to tighten a little bit. She climbed back into the trunk, and she turned that into a lasso. I held the trunk open. Peter coached from the window. "Oh, almost got it. Keep trying." She tried and tried, and she got it. She pulled ever so slightly, and it hooked on. But she didn't have the right angle to be able to lift it up. Oh, we were so close. And then I thought, hey, we're Midwesterners. We always have an ice scraper in the car, right? It's May, but you never know. We have the long kind that has a brush on one end and a flat edge on the other. I handed that to Madeline. she held onto the brush end and put the flat end against that lock, against the knot on the lock, and pushed it up very carefully, and it popped up. It was a miracle. So Peter flew that door open, climbed in, unlocked all the doors. We drove it safely home, parked it in the garage until we could get it fixed. And Peter wisely suggested we put the back seat down so that if we accidentally locked the door again, we could simply crawl through. And we were just so proud of ourselves. You know, we did not give up on Pearl, just like she has not given up on us all these years. Never say never to a family of resourceful optimists.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Now, I don't know about you, but as soon as Pearl unlocked, when that pop happened, I was like, thank goodness. Also, here's that reminder to name your car if you haven't already, so that one day you'll be able to tell a story like that. Can we get one more round of applause, please, for Barb? Our next storyteller is none other than Milan Wall. Milan is co-director of the Heartland Center for Leadership Development, a nonprofit organization known worldwide for its practical resources for community vitality. A native of North Platte, Nebraska, Milan has been a journalist, higher education administrator, and independent consultant. Performing What Business Are We In? Welcome, Milan Wall.
So let me start by asking you a question. Raise your hand if you remember a time when your mom, maybe your grandmother or a favorite auntie did a lot of home canning. Yeah, lots of hands go up. Leave your hand up if you do a lot of home canning today. A couple, maybe. Good for you. Those of you who are familiar with home canning, what are some of the favorite brand names of canning jars that you can remember? Ball. Kerr, yeah. There you go. So Ball, that's the brand name my mom used when I was growing up in North Platte. Down in the basement with all the steam rolling and so forth. And she was filling up canning jars with stewed tomatoes and other things. Well, let me give you a little context for the story I'm going to share about the Ball Corporation. Several years ago, I was on the staff of a long-distance learning project at the University of Nebraska. This was before the internet, so the kind of media we used, other than textbooks and workbooks and the like, were public television and public radio. And our project had a lot of advisory committees. And I went to a meeting of one of those advisory committees one day in Washington, D.C., and we had a luncheon meeting at what was then the Hampshire Hotel off of DuPont Circle. And I went in and sat next to a tall, white-haired, distinguished-looking gentleman. And as we were introducing one another to get ready to sit down for lunch, I learned that this was Ed Ball, chairman of the Ball Corporation. And so he introduced himself. He just said, Ed Ball, Muncie, Indiana. And I'm thinking, Ball State University is in Muncie, Indiana. So I said to Mr. Ball, did you have anything to do with Ball State University? He said, oh yeah. Yeah, our family had quite a bit to do with that. oh, okay. I'm beginning to get even more impressed by Mr. Ball. By the way, I learned later that at 80 years old, he'd flown his own airplane to the meeting. And he was a founder in educational television. He helped start an ETV station in Indiana. He served on the PBS board. Anyway, the next thing I said to him was, well, do you make Ball canning jars? And he said, yeah, we used to make a lot of those. I'm thinking, used to make a lot of those? So I said, well, that's kind of a past tense statement. He said, yeah, I said when women started working a lot outside the home, the number of women who did canning dramatically declined. And so did the sales of our canning jars. And so we were looking at a really serious situation about whether our company was even going to thrive and survive. And I said, so what'd you do? And his answer was, we took our executive team off to a retreat center for a weekend. And we said, well, we've been in the canning jar business for all these years, but that's not going to work anymore. So what business should we be in? And he said a lot of intense negotiation went on for a couple of days, but finally we decided that rather than be in the canning jar business, we should be in the container business. I thought, that sounds pretty smart. I had just been asked to help write a strategic plan for my project, and I was reading up on things like strategic positioning, which hadn't been on my radar screen at all before. And so Mr. Ball's answer intrigued me. And so the next question I asked was, well, what kind of containers do you make anyway? And he said, sort of boldly, we make every container Anheuser-Busch beer is sold in. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that's probably a lot of containers. And so the conversation continued, and I said, so do you make any other kind of containers? He said, yeah. He said, if you think about the computer that's on your desk, it's surrounded by a container. And we make those containers to put computer parts in. That's our computer division. Okay. I said, anything else? He said, well, yeah, now we have a space division. Space division? Yeah, I said, if you picture a satellite circling the Earth, all those satellite components go into a container. We make those. Well, the Ball Corporation, by the way, sold its canning jar business to another company. They sold the trademark too, so you can still buy Ball canning jars. I looked at Ace today. They were there on the shelf. And well, they still make a lot of beverage containers. They make more beverage containers than any other company in the world. They make them on 4 continents. They have 21,000 employees. Some of those employees moved from Muncie to Westminster, Colorado, when the space division began to grow so dramatically. And so that's where their headquarters is now. And among the space components that they made recently were many of those that went into the James Webb Space Telescope. So here's a transformation of this company from making, at first, tin cans, basically, then canning jars, and now space components for a machine that's trying to look back into the formations of this planet and many others, millions and millions of years. So what is the lesson we can take away from this? For me, it's that if your situation changes, the conditions that surround you are somewhat different, You're challenged to figure out how you move ahead, play off of your strengths, reinvent yourself a little bit, and reposition yourself for success down the road. I think if the Ball Corporation can do it, so can we. Thank you.
Well, I'm never looking at containers the same again. Can we have one more round of applause, please, for Milan Wall? I love these stories. I'm like, yes, like life lessons, writing these down, saving these in my notes. Our next storyteller is Jennifer Poole. Jennifer is a theater artist and nonprofit professional. She's worked as a costume designer in Omaha and Lincoln and is actually the founder of the Goldenrod Anecdotalist Society, an Omaha-based community storytelling organization. Performing Learning to Apply Myself, give a big round of applause for Jennifer Poole.
So, one thing I've always known to be true about me, if I may, is that I'm pretty smart. That sounds pretty egotistical, but it's something that was backed up for me by my friends and coworkers and colleagues. It was something that was also backed up to me by my parents and my teachers. However, when my parents and my teachers would say it, they would add a little caveat, a little follow-up statement. And they would say, Jennifer, you are so smart. If only you would apply yourself. And this sort of followed me throughout my whole life. Oh, Jennifer, you would be so smart if only you had discipline. Oh, Jennifer, when you learn willpower, you're gonna kill it. I had a teacher in college. At the time, she was my favorite. She didn't stay in that role much longer after this conversation. And I let her know that I was going to be dropping her class because I just wasn't feeling it. And she said to me, I understand. She said, if you want to do something, there is no one in the world who is going to do it better than you. But on the other hand, if you decide to put something, well, she didn't call it my forget it pile, but I've been told this is a family show, so I will call it my forget it pile. She says, when you decide to put something in your forget it pile, nothing's coming back. It's a done deal. So that's what I knew about myself. I was smart, but I didn't apply myself. So one day, about a year ago, I'm sitting on my bed, not applying myself, scrolling through Facebook, as one does. And I'm scrolling, and I see celebrity drama and petty personal drama, win some cute shoes that I think I want to get, win a puppy. And I don't know what made me stop on this video, but I did. I stopped and I started watching this video. And in this video, this woman was describing doom boxes. Now, I don't know if any of you know what a doom box is, but basically what it is when you get to the point where you have to clean, but you can't really do it, you scoop all of the offending clutter and random things into a box or a bag, and then you shove it in the corner and forget about it forever. And I'm watching this video and I'm like, oh my God, I didn't know that had a name. And I was like, not only did I not know that it had a name, I didn't know that enough other people did it for it to have a name. And so I watched and I said, what is this lady gonna say to me? And she says, these are things that people with ADHD do. And I did not receive that. I thought that was very rude of her to say, because I absolutely knew that I did not have ADHD, and I knew that for 3 particular reasons. Number 1, I am a girl. Girls don't have ADHD. Everyone knows that. Number 2, I went to elementary school with a kid who had ADHD, has ADHD. He was in 4th grade, probably should have been in collegiate math, and was diagnosed ADHD. So all of that energy meant that he would do things like flip chairs and throw books and jump up on counters and squawk like a chicken and flap his arms. And I didn't do any of that. And not only did I not do that, but there was no part of me that wanted to do that. I wasn't repressing that urge. So that's what I knew that ADHD looked like, and I didn't look anything like that, so there was no way. The other reason, the final reason that I knew that I couldn't have ADHD was the fact that I was 42 years old. You don't get diagnosed with ADHD when you're 42 years old. That is a diagnosis for children. I am not a child. I do not have ADHD. I don't know if any of you have ever been intrigued by something that you see on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. If you have, then you know that the algorithm is a jerk. And that if you stop on something and you engage with something, then every time you go back to that platform, it'll be like, would you like some more? Would you like some more? Would you like some more? So I would be scrolling and it would be like celebrity drama, ADHD, petty emotional friend drama, ADHD, puppy, ADHD. I couldn't get away from it. So finally I messaged my friend who's a therapist in Colorado and I said, Allison, Facebook is trying to tell me that I have ADHD. Can you help? And she says, well, here is an informal survey you can do. And so I took the survey and the survey told me that I had ADHD, and I was like, no, you're wrong, I'm sorry. And so this went on for some weeks, scrolling, ADHD. And so finally I decided it was time to go see a real psychiatrist with an office and a desk and a little plant and maybe a logo that has a flower in it. And so I made this appointment, and he sends me the link to an online assessment, and he says, take this before you come. And so I did it, and then I show up, and he says, here are your scores. And he said, the thing you need to know is that we don't give definitive diagnoses. That's not how this works. That's not how this field works. That's just not what we do. But here, take a look at your scores. And I looked down at the piece of paper, and there were numbers like 98%. 85%, 96%. And I was like, I don't see the problem. That's A's and B's. I passed. And he said, no, that's not what that means. What that means is you scored higher on this than 98% of people. And I said, so I passed. And it's very easy to joke about this, and I have to joke about this, right? Because if I didn't joke about it, if I didn't try to laugh, I would think too much about how mad I am. I would think about the fact that I had coaches and teachers and all of these adults in my life who were so easy to tell me that I was lazy and didn't look beyond that. I would think about the fact that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of other women like me who spent their whole lives being told that they were lazy and didn't have any willpower and weren't disciplined and didn't get this diagnosis and the help that they needed. And most of all, if I thought about it enough, I would be really mad that ultimately my diagnosis came from Facebook. So there's no big grand moral. There's no lovely button I can put on this. I have the diagnosis. There's not a magic wand that I can wave, not even Adderall, when you can get it. But one thing that I do know, one thing that I have learned, one thing that I can say with absolute conviction is that I am smart. And no, I'm not lazy. I have ADHD. Thank you.
Any of y'all got a Doombox? Anyone here Doomboxing? Yeah, that's my Doombox friends. I see you there. How'd y'all feel about those storytellers? Can we give them all a round of applause? Friends, we have hit our midway point at the first ever Nebraska Storytelling Festival. This means two specific things. First, you can use the restroom. Ooh. Second, there's wine. There's drinks, there's water if you're a water person. It's right out here. Please swing by the bar. We're going to take about 15 minutes here. We'll let you know when it's time to come back in. Welcome to the festival, y'all. Get your wine? Yes. That's okay. That's okay. Water also works very, very well. How'd y'all feel about those first half of speakers? Can we give them a round of applause? Again, we want to just say a sincere thank you for coming out to the first ever Nebraska Storytelling Festival. This thing is absolutely fun, and again, we're incredibly thankful to have you here. As this is a storytelling festival, I want to tell a story. I know. So, pardon me. So here's one about one of my first jobs in high school. When I was in high school, I went to Lincoln Southwest here. I wanted to serve pizza. I thought it was the coolest job. I wanted to have it here and do the whole hey, got you, slide around their table in some really cool way. I don't know. I really wanted to do it. So I applied at a pizza parlor, got the job, except it was a hosting job. I didn't tell the manager that I wanted to serve. I was like, on YouTube, they always say, get your foot in the door, and then you'll work your way up from there. So, I'll have the big boy job soon. I was working as a host for a few months, and I start getting antsy. I'm like, man, I want to be a server. I'm telling my friends about it, telling my pastor about it, telling my mom about it, and mom's like, why don't you just tell the manager that you want to be a server? Oh, that's how it works. Okay. So I tell the manager, hey, I'd like to be a server, and his response is, thank you, we'll see. We'll see? Just sign me up, or put me in the training course, or whatever you have to do. I didn't know there was licensing or anything like that. It's my first job, remember, so he has every right to be like, we'll see, son. But I really wanted to do this. So I go back to my mom, I tell her, he says, we'll see, she says, be patient. A few months later, I'm in anguish. I'm straight up, why can't I be a server? What's wrong with me? You know how you do those food trades with other restaurants? You ever in fast food and you do the food trade? When you get sick of your food, you go eat their food and they do the little switch with you. So we did that with a competing pizza place. So when we got tired of our pizza, we'd literally go over there and give them a slice of ours and they give us a slice of theirs. You know what I'm saying? It was great for us at the time. We were broke, the pizza was delicious, it was awesome. But over there, they had plenty of serving jobs, all the time. But I was so connected with the friends that I had at the place that I already was hosting at. Wanted to be a server, connected with my friends at the hosting spot. And here's again why, because we're in high school. So it's not just we're adults and doing our adult things and we make our own decisions. No, this is social hierarchy in jeopardy if I leave this job. But then this guy comes in to work at the place that I'm hosting at. His name's Michael. And Michael's the coolest dude. He's awesome. People love him. Michael's smart. But Michael is a horrible server. I'm not joking. He messed up just about every single day of the first 3 weeks that he was there. And we had a really great relationship. We'd give each other, mess with each other a little bit. Hey, you messed up. You messed this up. You messed that up. And eventually I get to ask Michael, look, you're messing up daily. Why do you have the confidence to still show up here every day? You could do anything else. He's well-liked. He's smart. He could do anything else. And what he said to me is, I like pizza. Now, we are in high school, so I didn't expect some Oxford-level answer. But again, we like pizza. And then I kind of got it. Michael really just gave himself permission to go for what he liked. He didn't have to be necessarily good at it. No one had to train him all the way up. He said, I like pizza. I'm going to go serve pizza wherever I can serve pizza. So you know what I did. About a week later, I went there, got an application, applied to be a server, left the other job, became an actual server, made a little bit more money, and my favorite part of all is I got to keep all of my friends. Thank you. So our next storyteller is Marcia White, who also made these beautiful, absolutely gorgeous programs that are in your hands. Yes, give her a round of applause. A native Nebraskan, Marcia grew up having stories read and told to her by her parents and grandparents. She believes stories connect us to our past, future, and each other. A Hopi proverb says, "Those who tell stories rule the world." Marcia says, "Thanks for helping me advance my plan for world domination." Performing The Last Dollar, please welcome Marcia White.
I recognized him immediately as he walked across the parking lot towards me. He would not recognize me. It had been one date more than 20 years before, and a lunch date at that. I, on the other hand, had the benefit of witnessing his recent and relatively well-publicized descent from athlete, dancer, fitness instructor through drugs and disease to crime. I made the unconscious decision not to reveal our previous connection, and I'm sure I did that to protect someone, but I don't know if I was protecting him or me. "Ma'am, I'm a Christian, ma'am," he said. And did he say that because we were standing in a church parking lot? Maybe. "Yes," I said, and that single syllable answer unleashed a flood of information, a roll call of doctors, a litany of medications, what was supposed to be a simple surgery, and he lifted his shirt to show me a scar that traversed his belly. More medication, stage 4, more treatment. Could I cut to the chase? "Could you tell me what you want?" "I need $18 for a room." $18? I didn't think you could get a room in this town for $18, I thought naively. But I opened the flap of my purse. He stepped forward. I looked up. He stepped back. "I won't hurt you." "I know," I said, and I did know. I didn't feel afraid. I wasn't afraid. I'd been intimidated by him when we'd known each other before. He was such an energy, such a presence, such a star. But that day, he felt smaller. I took out my wallet and opened it, and he leaned in again, and I looked up. He backed away. "I see a 10, he said, his eyes bright. And he did. He saw a $10 bill. There was a $10 bill that he could see, and 3 ones that only I could see. $13. I pulled out $12, and I handed it to him. "It's all I have," I lied. "Thank you, ma'am. God bless you, ma'am." Church parking lot effect. As I walked to my car, I wondered if he was noticing which car I got into or taking note of my license plate, and then it hit me. Why not the last dollar? Why, when if I needed the money, I could walk across the street to the ATM and get more? Why, when just by lifting the flap of my purse, I had broken every rule about giving on the street that I'd made for myself after years of living in downtown Lincoln and West Africa? As I got into my car, a deeply buried memory came into my consciousness, and it was a memory from a set of self-help tapes, yes, cassette tapes, that I had listened to during one of my many self-improvement kicks over the years. And in this particular segment of the program, the author was relating a number of interviews he'd done with people who'd had near-death experiences. And the conclusion was that there is indeed a final exam to life. And it has 2 questions. What have you learned? And how have you loved? And when you see your life flash before your eyes, it's not so much a documentary as it is a highlight reel of all the times in your life when you withheld love. Withheld love. And I wondered, would that encounter be on my highlight reel? And I wonder about you. Do you have a last dollar? Is it $1? Is it your time? Is it attention? Is it forgiveness? Is it love? Later that day, I spent the last dollar on a cookie, a day-old cookie that I did not need nor particularly enjoy. And all these years later, I'm still wondering, why not the last dollar?
One more time for our lovely Marcia White. Man, thinking about that list, like withholding love, like I never want to withhold love again. I love each and every one of you, starting right now. Our next storyteller is Craig Larson. Craig has been an after-dinner speaker and storyteller for 25 years. He's performed at lots of events, tons of events, including the 2007 National Storytelling Festival in Jonesboro, Tennessee. A career broadcaster, Craig has worked in radio for more than 40 years in the state of Nebraska. We call that a real veteran. He's also worked in Arizona, Louisiana, and Missouri, performing Prize Closet. Please welcome Craig Larson.
Thanks for coming out tonight. Good evening. Thanks for coming out and supporting storytelling. I've always heard that weddings are a good place to meet people, to make a love connection. In the spring of 1997, I was in a wedding, and I met a young bridesmaid by the name of Wendy from Chicago. Windy City Wendy, I called her. The first night at the rehearsal dinner, we hit it off. We had a few drinks. I told her some Sven and Ole jokes, some Swedish jokes, and we talked about the plight of developing countries, the plight of the third world, something that I care about. I really do. But that was one of Wendy's passions. So that night, I really cared about the plight of developing countries. The next night at the wedding reception, we picked up where we left off. We had a few drinks, maybe more than a few. We danced. I told her some more Swedish jokes. And of course, we talked about the plight of developing countries. At the end of the night, I offered to drive her back to where she was staying. Now, this was at the time of the Hale-Bopp comet. And I said, instead of going straight back, why don't we take a drive out in the country and see if we can spot the comet? And she said, yes. What a great pickup line. Too bad I can only use that once every 2,400 years, but it worked that night. So we end up out in the country, stargazing, comet watching, and whatever else young people do out in the country. The next day, I decided to go by and tell her goodbye before she went to Chicago. And I thought, I need to give her a gift, a going-away present. Now, I've worked in radio most of my life, and most radio stations have what they call a prize closet. It's where you keep your bumper stickers and coffee mugs and hats and things like that. Well, at my house, I also have something similar, just random gifts that you pick up along the way because you never know when you're going to need a present. So I'm digging around in the prize closet and I find a Swedish oven mitt. I think I bought it in Lindsborg, Kansas. It had little Swedish flags on it, some dollar horses. And I was probably gonna give it to my mom and never got around to it. I thought, well, this is perfect. I've been telling Swedish jokes for the past 2 nights. And besides, in my mind, nothing says to a woman, I'd like to get to know you better, than a Swedish oven mitt. So we say our goodbyes, and off to Chicago she goes. Now, for the next several weeks, we had a lot of communication back and forth. This was before I had email, so we were actually writing letters to one another. And we had late night phone calls. And there was an invitation, more than one, for me to come visit her in Chicago. We find the day, I'm packing, getting ready to go to the airport, and think, I need to bring her a gift. What should I do? I'll go to the prize closet. And I dig around, and I find a little purse from Guatemala. I picked it up on a Habitat for Humanity trip years earlier. Like, well, this is perfect. Here's the plight of developing. We're stimulating the Guatemalan economy, Wendy. Well, I finish packing, off to Chicago I go. Now, when I arrived, I sensed that we would not be picking up where we left off. It was a very chilly reception at O'Hare. And I don't know why. The stars weren't out, the comets weren't out, it was daylight, we were both sober. Maybe that was it. So that first night, as I'm trying to get comfortable in this lumpy, pokey, sticky, terrible feeling hide-a-bed in her living room, I hear her bedroom door shut and a series of deadbolt locks begin to latch. I think there were 5 or 6, I lost count. So I'm trying to get comfortable and think, you know what? This is kind of a wasted trip. Blew a couple days vacation, spent a couple $100 on airfare. When I get home, because of this hide-a-bed, I'm gonna have to go to the chiropractor. You know what? I'm not gonna give her that purse from Guatemala. So there, Wendy. We're even. You don't get the purse from Guatemala. Back home it goes into the prize closet. Now, I'd long since forgotten about that horrible trip. But as many years later, it was a Sunday, and I was off to my monthly dinner party. And I was headed out the door, and I remembered one of the reasons we're meeting tonight. The wife of the Methodist minister was having a birthday. Can't show up empty-handed. I go to the prize closet. I dig around, and I find the purse from Guatemala. Perfect. This woman's been to Central America on mission trips. Perfect. Throw it in a gift bag, off I go. We finish supper, we have desserts, she's opening her presents. She gets to mine like, oh, how cute, how lovely. I remember being in Ecuador and seeing something similar. And she opened the purse and she started to pull something out. And as I saw that turquoise color, it hit me. In anticipation of picking up where I left off with Wendy, I had packed some protection. And I must have been very confident because I packed a lot of protection. And I'm across the room like, no, stop. So, that's a hard one to explain. But I did, and they got a good laugh out of it. And there's the old adage that fits a lot of my life: tragedy plus time equals comedy. And this is one of those where tragedy plus comedy. It wasn't very funny that night, but we can laugh about it today. So there's no real moral of the story, but I will leave you with this thought. We've all heard stories of the Trojan horse. Well, this is the story of the Trojan purse. And like the Trojan horse, there was a big surprise inside. So, thank you.
I tell you what, I feel like everyone has a story where anticipation got the best of them, but that takes the cake. A birthday party? One more round of applause, please, for Craig. Man. Our next storyteller is Toni Heimes. Toni has been an English teacher and debate coach at Lincoln Southwest High School for the last 21 years. Before moving to Lincoln, she taught in Red Cloud Community Schools and Juanita Palisade High School. As an avid crafter, Toni owns her own business, Bookish by Toni. Performing I'll Wait Until You're Quiet, welcome Toni Heimes.
I mean, I can just stand here and wait until you're quiet. It's Friday. It's mid-May. And my classroom has that sticky, humid, musty, moist, if you will, sort of feel. I spend my days looking at my students look at their phones instead of using the workday that I've so graciously given them. I mean, I usually take their phones per policy, but they're 14, it's a workday, and they, like I, sometimes need a little sense of control. It's like when I used to take the high chair into the living room and put marshmallowy cereal on the tray and then put the child right in front of the TV. Because sometimes you just need quiet. There might be some correlation or causation to his 22 years of sometimes questionable behaviors, but he was quiet. I need them to be quiet because I need to do my work. I need them to be quiet because I do not need them to say dumb stuff to each other that I have to deal with. I need them to be quiet because in May, everything I say to them sounds accusatory, and everything they say to me sounds like drivel. I have not lasted in the classroom for 30 years to lose my job because I lost my cool. You've seen the videos, right? The day the teacher unabashedly loses it, and they say, F you and F you and you little so-and-sos. I just want to reach through that screen. I just want to grab that teacher. And I want to say, listen, I see you. I hear you. But honey, you should have just let them have their phones. You would think that after 30 years in the classroom, that I'd have it all together. That I would have perfect files, that I would have the key to every test and quiz that I'd ever given, and that my red pen skills would be impeccable. Now, if you believe that, you would be as incorrect as a freshman trying to use a semicolon. As a 22-year-old Miss Shoemaker, my students used to call me Shoe. My principal did not like that very much. One day I wrote a note, meet me at the stage, Shoe. And I put it on the door. And he ripped it down. And he pulled me into his office to reprimand me for being unprofessional. 30 years later, those students still call me Shoe. Now, Shoe is not a bad nickname. In the last 4 years of my dad's career, his theater kids gave him the moniker of Big Sexy. My dad was a theater teacher, a speech coach, and an English teacher for 44 years. And when he passed away, we received dozens of handwritten letters full of stories of his dedication, his motivation, and his advice. Now, I only have one piece of advice that I ever give. Every first-year teacher I ever meet, I tell them this: Under no circumstances should you ever put a box of Kleenex on your desk. Because you know how when you're holding a baby and you're looking in their eyes and they're so cute and they're cooing and then they sneeze directly in your mouth? Well, freshmen do that too. I always follow that one rule in my classroom, but I also try to always, be a little non-compliant. If there's a whole bunch of rules that I have to follow, I choose 2 to not do. So if I have to post my objectives, grade papers in a reasonable amount of time, take attendance, wear shoes, I choose 2 to not do. It's like the Goldilocks effect. If I break 3 rules, it feels irresponsible. If I break 1 rule, I'm being far too compliant. But 2's just right. As far as rules and my students, I'm pretty laid back. Are you being respectful? Are you doing your work? Do you share your snacks with me? If the answer is yes, we get along great. But sometimes the road is not great. And then those students, as they get older, start to feel a little bit guilty about the things they did to their teachers. And then those students go out with their friends, and then they come home, and they have a few libations, and then they sit down at their computer, and they write a little Facebook message. And they say, "Hey, Shu, hey, I just wanted to tell you how sorry we were about the way we treated you in high school. You know how we took that picture of your face, and then we went down to my dad's law office, and then we made 1,000 copies of it, and then we put them all over the school? Well, I just wanted to say we were real sorry." And I wrote back, "Hey, it's really good to hear from you. You were just being creative. I mean, I hardly remember crying myself to sleep at night because of how mean you were to me. I barely remember the day your parents came to me and said that I wasn't challenging you, and I wasn't sure how I was supposed to teach you while you were putting pictures of my face in the urinal. I mean, I hardly remember it. Have a good night." Was teaching those students 30 years ago easier than it is today? When I first heard about the Columbine shooting, I was teaching in a small town in western Nebraska. So far west, in fact, it's in mountain time. And I thought to myself, this has to be a horrible one-time tragedy. That summer, we went to the National Speech and Debate Tournament, and the team from Columbine was staying at our hotel. And we went down to the pool, and there were 2 students, and they had on these shirts. And they said, "We are Columbine." What is going on? How did we all become Columbine? There is not a teacher in America who has not wondered if their desk is sturdy enough to take a bullet. Last week at a fire drill, I had a 21-year-old brand new teacher say to me, "I am fully prepared to die for my students." I'll just wait until you're ready. Come on, let's go back to my classroom. It's still Friday. It's still May, and Noah has touched everything on my desk, including my water. And now he's rubbing his feet on the carpet. Callan calls from across the room, "Hey, you need to quit emailing my mom. You're getting me in trouble." And I just yell back, "Hey, then do your work." He just said no. Ahmed and Lucy, 2 of my students who haven't read one page of their Lit Circle books spend the day throwing things at each other and giggling. Cody, a 6-foot freshman with a tardy issue, crawled into my room. And because he was looking at me, instead of looking where he was going, he ran his face right into a table leg. I said to him, "Cody, why are you crawling into my room?" And he just stood up, blood dripping on his Under Armour shirt. He said, "Please don't give me another lunch detention." I said, "Just go to the bathroom." During fourth block, I just started taking kids' computers and typing their works cited for them, because honestly, it is easier than teaching them how to do it again. Now, luckily, teaching from August to April is nothing like teaching in May. I mean, February is not great. But you know what is great? The first time they put on their debate suit, or their basketball uniform, or their band hat. When they do better, when they finally get it, when they have compassion and caring in their eyes, and you realize that that compassion and caring is for you, their teacher. When they zip up each other's backpacks, when they laugh at stuff that's actually funny. The confidence you see in them when you say their name correctly and you don't ask them if they have a nickname. When you treat them like adults, but are flexible when they screw up like a kid. When there are signs and acts of inclusivity in a classroom. When you give them structure, when you let them play, but most importantly, when you include them in your story. Thank you.
So Toni already knew I was going to do this, but Toni and her husband, Matt, were actually my speech and debate coaches at Lincoln Southwest High School and literally encouraged me, taught me, and supported me through my entire career and are the reason I'm standing in front of you today because of my educators at Lincoln Southwest High School. Can we give them a round of applause? Love y'all. I really mean it. Our final storyteller is bringing you something that will literally melt your soul. Jennifer Okoliko is a native of Nigeria and a graduate student in the leadership education at UNL who first came to Lincoln as a 2018 Mandela Washington Fellow. She's passionate about leadership development and raising leaders from unexpected places. Her life's goal is to strengthen marginalized groups, especially women and girls. Performing Love Had the Answer, please welcome Jennifer Okoliko.
I had just taken my seat at the lounge in the airport when the announcement came on that our flight was going to be delayed for another 2 hours. Now you see, the normal, energetic, and restless me would have been very frustrated by that announcement. I hated being told that I had to sit still for a few minutes, not to talk of hours, especially without prior notice. But this time, that announcement made me happy. It made me happy because it bought me some extra time to be able to think through what decision I was going to take with the two options I had before me. You see, I had just completed one of the most exciting interviews that I've ever had, and I had been offered a job to work with one of the top leading organizations in Nigeria. and I was going to be paid a salary that will enable this 25-year-old live a very luxurious life. But I was torn. I was torn between taking that offer or staying back with my nonprofit, which I just started, to support girls in my community to get an education and fulfill their dreams like I did. What was the best decision to take at this point? I mean, I couldn't just abandon these girls. I had become a beacon of hope and strength for them, and it would be unfair to just leave them hanging. But I needed this money. I wanted to have all of the luxurious things that I've always dreamed of having and just make my family live a more comfortable life. I went back and forth in thoughts, wondering what the right decision to take would be. 2 hours went by really quickly, and we were boarding. I sat down there and waited for everyone to get on first. Not because I wasn't excited to go back home to my family and my boyfriend, but I wanted this to be my decision. I didn't want it to be influenced by all of the advice or the inputs that I was going to be getting. I wanted it to be me. I boarded, and as I walked down the aisle, I caught a glimpse of the faces of everyone in the airplane, and I just seemed to want to ask them, do any of you have answers for me? Have you ever been in this situation? What decision did you take, or what decision would you take, and what was the consequences? I took a seat at almost the last row in the airplane, and at this time my head was banging with a throbbing headache. So I threw on my headphones, put on my favorite song just to drown those thoughts and give myself some peace. But it made it worse. I pulled the headphone out and I caught a glimpse of the airplane taking off from the chaos of people running about and cars moving all around to the peaceful, beautiful skies above. And then a funny thought hit me. We're closer to heaven, right? So maybe God would write something on one of these clouds, and then I would know what the best decision was. I stared longingly. Seriously, I did. There was nothing, except that it made me drift off to sleep. And I was awakened by the announcement by the pilot that we had begun our descent into the Milan and Minukano airport. I was home. But for the first time, I wasn't excited about that. Being the last to board, I was the last to alight, so I stepped out onto the staircase leading out of the airplane, and I pulled out my phone to text my brother that we had landed so he could pick me up. "Excuse me, ma'am," I heard a voice say to me. I looked down at the foot of the staircase, and there was an airport security guard standing right there, staring at me. Now, you see, I had grown up in the airport because my parents had worked at the airport, and that was where they met, that was where they got married. So I had grown up there and spent a lot of time with my siblings at the airport. So I was used to random strangers walking up to me and saying, "Oh, I knew you when you were a kid, I knew your parents, and la 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 la." So when I saw him, I expected that would follow. "Are you Miss Jennifer?" he asked. "Yep. He's one of them." So I braced myself up for the not too funny jokes of, "You've grown so big, I knew you when you were this little, and now you're also grown." "Yes, I'm Miss Jennifer," I responded reluctantly. "You will have to come with me now, ma'am." "Okay, that wasn't what I was expecting." "Come with you? Why? To where?" "You will find out in a couple of minutes," he said as he turned sharply and began to walk away without even waiting for me. I quickly grabbed onto my luggage and ran after him. "Excuse me, sir, where are we going, and why do I have to come with you?" I asked. "Please be patient, you will find out very soon," he responded without even looking back at me. Now my mind began to race back and forth. I hadn't checked in any bag, right? So they wouldn't have found drugs, not like I did drugs. So what exactly was the problem here? Now, I said I had grown up in the airport, so I was familiar with a lot of the routes, and I knew that he wasn't heading towards the security office. Where are we going? What is going on? And where is this man taking me? After taking some familiar and unfamiliar routes, we bursted out into the big hall where we had passengers racing to catch their flight, some waiting to grab their luggage and others waiting to be picked up. Farther down, I noticed a crowd. They were holding placards and cardboards, and they seemed to look like people who were protesting. As I continued to follow, I noticed he was walking towards that crowd. And as we approached them, I noticed they seemed to part as if to give way for us to walk through. And as we got closer, he stopped and then stepped aside, smiling. My face went from him to a young man right there in the middle of the crowd. He was on his knees with a purple box in his hand, and it had this silver shining ring in it. That was when I looked around and I noticed that the people in the crowd were my childhood friends, my friends from high school, my church friends, my colleagues from the office, and my family. And I noticed that on the placard was written, "Jennifer, will you marry me?" "That's Timothy," I said. "That's my boyfriend." Now, despite the fact that we had been dating for over 6 years, that was totally unexpected for 2 reasons. First of all, in my culture, you don't talk about marriage until you have worked and saved up money for about 2 years. This young man had only been working for less than 3 months. And secondly, the Timothy that I knew was a very reserved, quiet, and shy person. In fact, the very few times that we had talked about my dream proposal, he had completely shut me down, making it clear that I was not going to have my dream of a public proposal because he was not comfortable with it. And there were so many things I loved about him, so I could sacrifice that one. I didn't realize that I had been standing there for a couple of minutes until some of my friends came and shoved me forward towards him. I noticed his lips were moving, but I did not hear a single word that was coming out of his mouth. He slowly took my hand. He didn't even wait for me to say a yes. He slid the ring on and pulled himself up. I was still staring in shock. He pulled me into his arms and hugged me. I felt his body trembling terribly. And at that point, it hit me that my reserved, quiet, and shy boyfriend had given up his preference and stepped out of his comfort zone so I could have mine. And at that point, I realized that in life and in love, sometimes you give up your comfort and your preferences so others could have theirs. At that point, I knew what decision I needed to take. And I realized that love had my answer. And that boyfriend, today, he has become my husband of 6 years with 2 girls. And coincidentally, today happens to be his birthday. Right there, Timothy. Happy birthday. I love you so much. Thank you.
Happy birthday, Timothy. You're everyone's favorite person in the room right now. Like, wow, you got out of your comfort zone. You did all that. Like, oh, I'm blushing, man. I'm just hearing about your story. Can we get one more round of applause, please, for Jennifer? In the year 2022, it's not very often that you get to be a part of something that's a first, right? A lot of the innovators around you, people say, oh, we did it here, we did it there. Today, you can say that you are at the first Nebraska Storytelling Festival. If at all, please take photos, some videos before you leave, right? Get together, share a moment and take a photo or something, commemorate it. Because in 50 years, we're gonna still be having this festival, and people are gonna be like, I wonder what the first one was like. And you're like, trust me, I know exactly what it was like. In order for something like that to happen, a first to occur, you have to have powerful and dedicated members of your community that absolutely want to make sure that this will happen. There's one in particular that we have to thank for even birthing this idea. Will you please put your hands together for our very own Randy Bretz? There are many different events that we would not have in our community if it wasn't for Randy, this being one of them. Yes, hello, can we give him another round of applause? It's Randy! Randy has been a phenomenal leader, educator, and of course friend to each and every single one of us on the committee. And I also want to say a big thank you to every single other one of our committee members. Please give them all a round of applause. Mary Kay Roth, keep it going. Doug Dickinson, Twyla Hanson, Bill Anderson, Marie Enders, Rich Clausen, Mark Stevens, Marcia White, and Pat Leach. Give them a big old round of applause, please. Now remember, this is going to be like the thing in Nebraska. We're actually submitting these stories to the MOF. If you're not familiar with the MOF, they are a national storytelling organization that hosts events across the country, but they get national attention. So next year, we're going to try to get in with them a little bit. Now, remember, I said a big thank you to our friends at Nebraska Public Media because they are already letting us put our stories on their platform, and we are incredibly grateful for their cooperation and collaboration, and thank them for that. We want to say a big thank you to Humanities Nebraska. Without them, we would not have the funding to do this, so please can we give them a round of applause. Of course, our friends at Bailey Lauerman as well for the logo and helping with our marketing. Yes, come on. And oh my gosh, the beautiful space that we have here. Can we please get loud for the Lincoln Community Playhouse? All right, 3 more things, I swear, at least if my math is correct. So, first things first, we're going to be having these on the Nebraska Storytelling Festival's YouTube channel. If you have a YouTube account, or actually if you have a Google account, you technically already have a YouTube account, make sure to go ahead and follow that page, subscribe to it, because we will be posting these stories on there. Also, there's going to be a survey that we would really, really love for you to take. We're going to be emailing that to you, but if you'd like to take it while you're still here in the building, the URL is tinyurl.com/ is that a / I'm thinking of? Yeah, the / Nebraska Storytelling. That's going to take you directly to that survey, but again, we're going to email that to you, and we please ask that you fill that out because this is the first. We want to make sure that the 50th is something that will literally blow people's minds. I like that. Yeah, I like the round of applause coming for the people in the back. They like that. And finally, a big thank you to each and every one of you for coming out, spending your time with us storytellers, and we really sincerely hope that you will take the storytelling spirit of Nebraska on the road with you as you travel safely home. Thank you for coming out, and have a great night.